New Year's morning began with laughter already in the room. Wrapping paper littered the floor. Coffee cups passed from hand to hand, and my family spoke over one another the way they always did when everything felt safe and familiar. I stood near the edge of the living room, holding a bag of specialty beans I had driven down with, waiting for the moment someone would look up and notice me. Mom lifted a box toward my brother with a proud smile. "This one's for you. I knew you'd need it this season." Ryan tore the paper off, already talking about how busy things were going to get. Dad clapped him on the shoulder, adding something about responsibility and stepping up. My nephew bounced in his seat, encouraged to open his gift next. Everyone had a turn. Everyone except me. I sat. I waited. The minutes stretched thin. Finally, I broke the silence, keeping my voice light, careful not to sound like I was asking for too much. Did I miss my name somewhere? Mom turned, her expression tired rather than surprised. "Why would we spend money on you anymore? You walked away from what matters to this family." The room didn't go quiet. It stayed loud in the most uncomfortable way. Ryan leaned back, amusement flickering across his face. "At least now you get it. You're basically a guest out of habit." Something shifted then, not sharply, not dramatically. It felt more like a door closing somewhere behind me. I placed the coffee beans on the table between us. "You'll need this more than I will." No one tried to stop me as I pulled on my coat and stepped outside. The cold air hit hard, but it was cleaner than the warmth I'd just left. This story is an original creation by the writing team of the Revenge Pulse channel, inspired by the hidden corners of family life and told with the purpose of fostering emotional connection and spreading understanding. By the time I reached my car, my hands were steady. That surprised me. I had imagined anger, maybe tears. Instead, there was clarity. They thought I had left. They thought I no longer counted. Back in Bellevue, hours later, I set my keys down and opened my laptop out of habit. The screen lit up with the dashboard I had built for them years ago, the one that quietly tracked every sale, every deposit, every dollar moving through their business. I stared at it longer than I meant to. If this story feels familiar, if you've ever been the one quietly holding things together while being treated like an afterthought, stay with me. What happened after that morning wasn't loud, it wasn't impulsive, but it changed everything they thought they knew about me and about themselves. The numbers on the screen refreshed, and for the first time that day, I didn't feel invisible anymore. By the time I crossed back into Washington, the story they told about me had already settled into its familiar shape. Evelyn left. Evelyn chose her own life. Evelyn didn't care enough to stay. That version had been useful for years. 5 years earlier, when everything started to crack, I was still answering late-night calls from my parents while sitting on the floor of my Bellevue apartment, laptop balanced on a moving box. My first real job in fintech had just begun paying enough for groceries without checking my balance first. I remember Mom's voice that night, stretched thin with forced calm. "We're fine. It's just a rough quarter." The numbers told a different story. Rent behind at 2 locations. Vendor invoices shuffled from one account to another. Equipment loans stacking up like cards no one wanted to touch. Ryan had been handling suppliers by then, a phrase that sounded responsible until you noticed nothing ever got simpler. Dad waved a hand when I laid out the spreadsheet on the kitchen table during one of my weekend drives down to Oregon. Small businesses don't run on spreadsheets. They run on relationships. Mom leaned in closer, lowering her voice as if the numbers could hear her. "Your brother knows people. He's keeping things moving." Ryan didn't look up from his phone. "I've got it under control. You worry too much." That was the night the word left first started circulating. Not spoken directly, but implied. I lived in Bellevue. I worked with numbers. I wasn't there every morning opening the shop. Therefore, I wasn't really part of it anymore. A week later, I drove back down with a proposal instead of an argument. My savings, my name, my skills, all of it on the table. Dad's pen hovered before touching the paper. This is temporary. Just until things stabilize. Mom's jaw tightened. We built this family business. Don't forget that. Ryan laughed under his breath. Guess the computer stuff finally pays off. They signed. Not because they trusted me, but because they were scared of what happened if they didn't. I drove north before sunrise the next morning, exhausted and oddly relieved. I told myself I hadn't left them. I had stepped back so they could breathe. Over time, they rewrote that choice into something else. A story where I walked away. A story where they owed me nothing. Back in my apartment, watching the dashboard load, I understood how cleanly stories could be edited when the truth lived quietly in the background. The paperwork sat between us like a challenge no one wanted to acknowledge. Pages stacked neatly, my notes clipped to the top, every line marked where a signature would land. Mom skimmed the first page, her lips pressed thin. This feels extreme. Dad adjusted his glasses, eyes lingering on the numbers longer than he meant to. Extreme is losing the shops. Ryan leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, confidence worn like armor. You're acting like we're drowning. We're not. I slid my laptop forward and turned the screen toward them. The projection was simple, almost boring. Cash flow, outstanding invoices, loan balances that refused to shrink. This is where we are. Came out steady. In 6 months, vendors stop extending credit. In 9, the bank starts calling every day. After that, you don't get to decide what happens. Mom's voice sharpened. And your solution is to take over. Ownership, I clarified. Majority ownership. I put in the money. I take the risk. I build a system that shows exactly what's coming in and what's going out. No guessing. No paper notes taped to machines. Ryan snorted. So now we answer to a dashboard. Now you answer to reality. Silence settled. Heavier than before. Dad reached for the pen again, fingers trembling just enough to notice. How much are you putting in $200,000? I answered without blinking. Everything I've saved? Mom stared, disbelief flickering behind her eyes. You'd gamble that much on us. It's not a gamble if we stop pretending. Ryan leaned forward at last. And what do you get out of it, besides control my name off the list of people who pretend they didn't see this coming? The pen scratched across paper. Dad signed first, relief washing over his face like he'd just been handed oxygen. Mom followed, slower, each letter deliberate. Ryan barely glanced at the page before adding his signature, already standing. Congratulations, he muttered. You're the computer boss now. I gathered the documents, stacking them carefully, hands steady despite the weight pressing into my chest. This isn't about being a boss. It's about survival. I left before anyone could respond, driving north through the dark with the signed pages in my bag. By the time I reached Bellevue, exhaustion had settled into something sharper. I opened my laptop that night and began mapping every register, every transaction, every place the truth could hide. I told myself that once the system was live, things would be different. They were, just not in the way I expected. The system worked. That part was undeniable. Within weeks, the calls from vendors slowed, rent checks cleared on time. Equipment payments stopped bouncing between accounts like bad news passed in secret. Mom called one evening, voice lighter than it had been in months. You should see the register lines again. People are coming back. Dad chimed in from somewhere off the phone. Told you we'd get through it. Ryan took credit without hesitation. Suppliers trust me. That's what did it. I let the comment slide. The numbers mattered more than recognition. Every night, I logged in from Bellevue, watched transactions roll in, checked totals against inventory. The bleeding stopped. The business breathed. At the first family barbecue after things stabilized, Mom wrapped an arm around Ryan in front of a group of regulars. He's been holding everything together. Someone asked what I did. Oh, Evelyn handles the computer stuff. Mom replied with a small laugh. Whatever that is. Ryan raised his drink in mock salute. Couldn't do it without the spreadsheets. I smiled because it was easier than correcting them. Small things began to register after that. Cash drawers short at closing, then fixed the next morning. Ryan leaving early, returning late, phone buzzing nonstop. Dad avoided eye contact when I mentioned tightening cash controls. It's fine. Mom insisted during one call. Don't turn this into something bigger. I pulled back, just enough to keep the peace. The system was stable. The business was alive. I convinced myself that was enough. Years passed that way, quietly, profitably, uneasily. Then New Year's Day arrived, and I found myself back in the living room where my name no longer mattered. The same house, the same voices, the same unspoken rules. Hours later, alone in my Bellevue apartment, I logged into the dashboard out of habit, the interface loaded cleanly, numbers refreshing across the screen. I hesitated, then opened a new panel I had added weeks earlier but never used. Bank reconciliation. The first mismatch blinked red, then another. I leaned closer, scrolling backward through months, then years, watching the gap widen in neat, unforgiving lines. The system hadn't failed. It had been telling the truth the entire time. The first call went unanswered. The second rang longer before Mom picked up, irritation already sharpened in her tone. This is a bad time. I need you to look at the deposits from last month, I answered, keeping my voice level. They don't match the sales totals. A pause stretched thin. Cash is messy. You know that. I know patterns. Came back evenly. This one repeats. Dad's voice cut in, lower, cautious. Are you saying something's wrong with the system? The system is doing exactly what it was built to do? Ryan's voice burst through the speaker, loud enough to sound confident. You're reading it wrong. Some days people pay cash and we don't run it all at once. Over 4 years and 8 months, I countered. Every location, every quarter. Silence followed, heavy and deliberate. I shared my screen anyway, letting the columns speak where people wouldn't. Gross sales on one side, deposits on the other. A growing gap that refused to shrink. Mom tried to smile through her voice. You're overthinking this. We've been under a lot of stress. The total difference is $684,000. Ryan laughed, sharp and defensive. That's ridiculous. It's documented. I continued. Between $9,000 and $15,000 missing each month. Consistently. Dad cleared his throat. This kind of accusation can hurt people. It already has. I replied, my name is on the filings. Ryan finally snapped. So what? You're calling us criminals, now I'm calling this unsustainable. Mom's voice softened, a familiar pivot. Your brother has been dealing with a lot. We didn't want to burden you. I was already carrying it. I answered, you just didn't tell me how much. The truth cracked through then, uneven and raw. Ryan's confidence drained, replaced by something brittle. I was going to fix it. One good run and it would have been gone. Gone where the question landed quietly, firmly. Dad muttered something about pressure, about timing. Mom whispered, almost pleading. If this gets out, it destroys him. I closed the call without another word. The files exported one by one, each progress bar inching forward with a calm that felt cruel. Transactions, logs, reconciliation reports, years of truth flattened into clean rows and timestamps. By morning, the box was ready. A drive, printed summaries, one note placed carefully on top. Plug this in. I watched the courier confirmation appear on my screen, then disappear. For the first time since New Year's Day, my chest loosened. They had trusted silence. I trusted records. The system refreshed again, numbers steady and indifferent. And I understood something clearly then. The damage wasn't new. Only my willingness to carry it was. Ryan showed up in Bellevue the next afternoon without warning. I watched him through the peephole for a moment, shoulders tense, phone clenched tight, confidence stripped down to something frantic. When the door opened, his smile arrived a second too late. "Evie, we need to talk." He stepped inside as if the space still belonged to him, eyes scanning the room, landing on the second monitor, the neatly stacked notebooks, the quiet order he never noticed before. Mom's voice came through his phone on speaker, already crying. "You've scared us half to death. Why would you send something like that?" "The reports are accurate," I answered, staying near the counter. "You've had access to the same numbers for years." Ryan cut in fast. "You don't understand how bad it got. It was supposed to be temporary. Temporary doesn't last 4 years and 8 months. He rubbed his face hard, voice dropping. "I was going to win it back. One streak, one clean slate. And if you didn't," Mom's voice sharpened, "you're pushing him into a corner." Ryan turned then, reaching into his jacket and pulling out his phone. He swiped once and held it up. A photo filled the screen. Noah, missing a tooth, smiling wide in a school hallway. "He doesn't know anything." Ryan pressed. "He just needs stability." "You wouldn't take that from him." The move landed exactly where it was meant to. My chest tightened, but I didn't step back. "You already did," I replied. "You just planned to let me pay for it." Dad's voice joined the call, quiet, resigned. "We never thought it would come to this." "That's the problem," I answered. "You thought I'd stay quiet." Ryan's shoulders sagged. "We're family." "I was family when I signed my name and put $200,000 on the line." I responded. "I stopped being family when you decided I was expendable." Silence stretched, thick and unfixable. Mom whispered, "Desperate now. If you go any further, you ruin us." I met Ryan's eyes, steady and unyielding. "I'm not ruining anything. I'm done dying for it." He left without another word. The hallway swallowed his footsteps, leaving the apartment heavier than before. I locked the door, leaned against it for a moment, then turned back to my desk. The files were already open. The next step waited. The video call came that night, all 3 of them framed together at the kitchen table, the same table where they once signed everything away with casual confidence. Mom looked smaller now, shoulders pulled in. Dad kept his hands folded, eyes fixed on the wood grain. Ryan sat rigid, jaw clenched, like holding still might keep the truth from spreading. Mom spoke first, voice careful, rehearsed. "We've been talking. We need to clear some things up." Ryan exhaled hard. This went further than it should have. Dad nodded once, as if that settled something. We lost control. I stayed quiet, letting the silence press back. Ryan's eyes finally lifted. It started with football. Small bets. Just enough to feel like I had an edge. Mom cut in quickly. He was under pressure. The business was drowning. Ryan continued, words tumbling now. One loss turned into another, then basketball, then sites that promised faster wins. I kept thinking the next one would fix it, and when it didn't, I asked. "Calm. Even." His voice cracked. "I took cash. Not all at once. I told myself I'd put it back." Dad's mouth tightened. We covered for him, just until he caught up. Mom leaned closer to the camera, eyes bright with urgency. "You don't understand what would happen if this came out. He'd lose everything. My name is on the filings," I reminded them. "I lose everything first." Ryan shook his head, frustrated. "We never thought you'd actually look that closely." There it was. The truth they hadn't meant to say. Mom tried to recover, reaching for the familiar weapon. "You're strong. You always have been. We thought you could handle it. I wasn't built to absorb your mistakes." I answered. I was built to stop them. Dad finally looked up, voice barely above a whisper. "What are you planning to do?" "I'm planning to protect myself." Mom's face crumpled. So you're choosing numbers over family. I held her gaze through the screen. I'm choosing not to be your insurance policy. Ryan opened his mouth, then closed it again. The fight drained out of him, replaced by something hollow. The call ended without goodbye. I sat there long after the screen went dark, the weight of what they'd admitted settling in my chest. They hadn't just hidden the truth. They had counted on me to disappear with it. I reached for my phone and dialed the number I'd saved earlier that day. Hannah Lewis answered on the second ring. Voice clear and professional. If you stay silent, she warned, you become part of it. I looked at the open files on my screen, each one bearing my name. Then silence isn't an option anymore. Hannah didn't waste time softening the truth. Your name is on the filings. If regulators find this without your disclosure, you won't be treated as a bystander. I listened, hands folded, eyes fixed on the exported reports. They signed my name. I offered, more than once. That makes it worse. Hannah replied, it shows intent, and it puts you squarely in the blast radius. The next steps came calmly, methodically. File with the State Revenue Department. Submit documentation through the federal whistleblower channel. Preserve originals. Do not warn them. Do not negotiate privately. Once this starts, Hannah added, you don't control the timeline anymore. I understand. After the call, my phone buzzed. Mom's name flashed, then disappeared. Dad followed. Ryan sent a message that didn't bother with greetings. You're really doing this. I typed once, then deleted it. The reports uploaded one by one, each confirmation email landing with a soft, final click. There was no rush of adrenaline, no dramatic release, just the quiet sense of stepping out of a room that had been filling with smoke for years. 2 weeks later, the first envelope arrived at my parents' house. White, official, heavy with consequences. Mom called again, voice sharp with panic this time. They're asking questions. They're freezing accounts. The records answer them. I replied. Dad took the phone, exhaustion seeping through his words. They never would have looked this closely if you hadn't pushed. They were always going to look. I answered. I just stopped standing in front of it. The line went dead. I didn't call back. That night, I shut down my laptop and sat in the quiet, feeling the shift settle in. Loyalty had kept me trapped. Law had drawn a boundary. For the first time since New Year's Day, I slept without rehearsing explanations in my head. The fallout didn't arrive all at once. It came in stages, carried by envelopes, phone calls, in long pauses where answers used to be. The first shop closed quietly, then another. Dad left a voicemail weeks later, voice thinner than I remembered. They're selling the equipment. It's not enough. Mom called once more after that, anger stripped down to blame. You turned your back on us. I stopped standing in front of the truth. I answered, steady. Ryan never called again. I heard about him through fragments, accounts frozen, marriage unraveling, a move to somewhere cheaper. The house went next. Decades of photos packed into boxes that didn't belong to anyone in particular anymore. When the paperwork to sell my remaining shares arrived, I signed without ceremony. The wire hit days later, smaller than people imagine when they hear the word justice, but clean, enough to start over without borrowing from anyone's silence. I moved into a modest place near the river, set up my desk facing the water, and built something new. Not another shield, not another hiding place. A tool designed to make patterns visible before they turn into disasters. One afternoon, a notification slid across my screen. An automatic transfer, scheduled quietly each month, heading into an account under Noah's name. No explanation, no conditions. Just a door left open where one had never existed for me. Some stories end with victory. This one ended with relief. Family doesn't mean absorbing damage until there's nothing left. Loyalty doesn't require you to disappear. And love, real love, doesn't ask you to carry someone else's addiction as your life sentence. If any part of this felt familiar, if you've ever been asked to stay quiet so others could stay comfortable, keep listening, keep sharing, keep telling your own story. The moment you draw a line can be quiet. It can also be the moment everything finally begins to belong to you.